And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
And then when we were outside, the second explosion happened, and there were then a series of explosions.
Some sketchy information here that another explosion, a fourth explosion out the World Trade Center has gone off.
We are continuing to hear explosions here downtown.
I am just about between 5 and 10 blocks north of the actual site of where those two towers have come down. We're obviously having a bit of trouble right now maintaining our location because we just heard one more explosion. That's about the fourth one we've heard. We're being pushed out as well because there was some concern that there might be additional explosions, possibly other bombs.
We hate to interrupt you. We've just been told
a fourth explosion.
Now
in the area of the World Trade Center. Obviously, neither tower is still standing. We don't know the source of this fourth explosion.
Do you know anything about those extra explosions we heard?
No, I do not.
Were they car bombs?
I have no idea, ma'am.
What about the sewers? Are they looking for bombs in sewers?
Mayor, I got reports of a gas explosion related to this. Are you aware of that? There was a gas leak or possible explosion.
We don't believe it. We don't believe that's the case.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us anything about where the planes come from, where the aircraft came from?
Bill Diamond reminds me that we've turned off the gas in the city buildings, just to be certain.
Can you tell us
as a precaution?
It's now 11 o'clock. Still hear continuing explosions, but I don't know what it is. A lot of smoke. Some emergency service vehicles heading away from the World Trade Center. People milling around the street. Maybe your car on fire. There's another explosion.
And I'm in the middle of the street walking, and a cop approached me and says, you know, who are you with?
I'm with the chief of Battalion 1.
Oh, you're Battalion 1? You got ID? Oh, you're Battalion 1? You got ID?
I don't have ID, I have my letter from the commissioner.
Take your letter and your camera and get out of here.
You gotta
get back from here. You know that. You gotta get back. All right. Don't worry about me. You gotta get back from here. You know that. You gotta get back. All right. Don't.
There's another one. Hours after the attack, many smaller explosions rumbled through downtown.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
Building is about to blow up. Moving back. We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up.
New York
very much a city still in chaos. The phones are not working properly, the subway lines are not working properly, and we know that down there near the World Trade Center there are 3 schools that are being turned into triage centers for...
Unfortunately, I think we've lost the line with Jane Stanley.
In this slowed-down footage of the South Tower demolition, we can see things that we wouldn't see with the naked eye. Notice how everything here is moving at the same speed. The flow of dust, the collapse of the building. Everything is moving at the same relative speed, with the exception of about a dozen lateral ejections. These ejections, which are moving at 10 or 20 times the speed of everything else, are caused by high-velocity explosives, a telling sign that proves beyond a doubt that explosives were used on 9/11, and that this collapse was nothing else but a demolition.
Donald, you're probably the best-known builder, particularly of great buildings in the city. There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid, and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747, or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
That's the third.
Imagine the explosive force necessary to blow a person straight out of a window. And it's just that window without any of the other windows or floors being affected. 9/11 deserves a second look. Not only for those that went through it, but for the millions of lives that have been affected ever since. Because if an explosion brought those towers down, then the whole thing's a mass deception. Remember, the people that told you about WMDs in Iraq were the ones who told you who did what on 9/11.
Investigate 9/11. 9/11 was perpetrated by people within our own government.
If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
While media prostitutes are relentless in their desire to further brainwash their gullible audience, we have been given a gift by a CNN cameraman who happened to capture something that the crappy news network wishes you didn't see. And since there's no doubt they're going to try to bury this, let's use the internet to get it out to as many people as possible. Before I play the clip, I want everybody to realize that the people you see sitting behind those supposed news desks in those studios with all that stage makeup as they read their pre-packaged news cycle fodder are not reporters. They're actors. Actors who slip into their roles every day and every night. And now we get to witness firsthand one of those actors as she puts on her fake serious face for the viewing audience. While reporting on the story of the 4 black thugs who maliciously tortured a mentally disadvantaged white guy, and after being asked by CNN's Wolf Blitzer how long this cold-hearted video is being live-streamed on Facebook, fake reporter and professional actress Sarah Ganem is seen trying to compose herself after she was caught laughing by one of the network cameramen. Here's the clip.
Enhanced charges.
It's so shocking, Sarah. How long was it being live streamed on Facebook? Sarah, how long was this being face streamed live on Facebook?
So this went on for about 25 minutes. The victim was able to escape when a neighbor called the police complaining of noise, and Chicago police say they eventually found the victim bloodied.
Guys, she got caught laughing during a story about an unspeakably horrible crime. What kind of heartless person do you have to be to act this way while reporting about a tragic event like this? Let's make some cursory observations. Sarah is sitting across from Blitzer on the set of the Situation Room. After Blitzer asked the question the first time, he gave her a full 6 seconds to respond. The cameraman catches her laughing, then fixing her hair as she attempts to gain a serious composure for the story she's about to read on the teleprompter. When she didn't respond, Blitzer asked the question again. I mean, it almost looks like there's an anticipation of an edit right here. But there is no edit, and we get to see the raw footage. Now, no matter how you look at it, what she does is out of place, distasteful, unprofessional, and honestly bizarre. When I saw this woman's cold-hearted reaction to this very serious, very tragic incident, it reminded me of another piece of cold-hearted stage acting that I had seen on CNN, also conducted by Wolf Blitzer, back in 2012 after the supposed Sandy Hook shooting. I mean, look at this guy. Let's watch him as he tries to convince the viewing audience that he actually lost a child that day.
Looks like the family is there, and they're getting ready to come to the microphone, so we'll listen in. Okay.
My name's Robbie Parker. My family is one of the families that lost a child yesterday in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings here in Connecticut. I've been contacted by so many people and agencies wanting to know how we're doing, and I just thought that this might be the best way to share those feelings with everybody.
Let me ask you guys, would you act like this if you lost your 6-year-old child that day?
You probably have seen this woman before, showing up on the spotlights and TV cameras, being interviewed by the biggest news channels of the American mainstream media during various false flag events with mass murder of people, and giving a scripted version of the facts that make them look like random killing rampages. In some cases she appears in 2 different places and 2 different times of the same event, often identified with different names and always giving key testimonies either as a real-time eyewitness, or as an acquaintance of the subjects directly involved in the event.
Happened right across from us, and it was just this huge explosion, and there's just debris everywhere.
Big huge explosion while we were having lunch, and everybody ran for the doors and windows and were sheltered under tables.
I believe on Nichols Ave down here, it was like a ton of gunshots.
He was looking at our lead soloist,
And I just remember seeing him hurtle over the pews, hurtle over people, and run towards us.
Definitely this lady is in the businesses of false flag events and inside jobs. There are no doubts about that. The only question now is, who is she? So whenever you spot her, wherever you see her, you better get the f*** out. Because a false flag event is either happening or already happened, and you could be the next patsy taking the fall.
What an incredible story of survival out of Texas. Tonight we're hearing from the teenager who was the sole survivor of a shooting this week that killed 6 members of her family. She spoke at a memorial service just 3 days after the tragedy.
Thank you all for coming and showing your support for me and my family. Stay strong.
Cassidy suffered a bullet fracture to the head, but managed to play dead.
15-year-old Cassidy Stay visited the memorial service for her family in spring today.
The memorial coming just days after a gunman shot her and killed her parents and all of her siblings.
I know that my mom, Dad, Brian, Emily, Becca, and Zach are in a much better place, and that I'll be able to see them again one day.
All right, people, let's get the obvious stuff out of the way here. Does this look like a girl that just got shot in the head 3 days prior to her public appearance? Does this look like a girl that has just lost her entire family during a hostage situation? Come on, y'all, you don't have to be a super brain to figure this one out. Somebody out there has thought that this cover story was gonna fly. They must have thought that the rest of society was so stupid that they could feed us a load of garbage like this. This is clearly a staged event. Print this story out, folks, and put it on the fridge. The establishment has declared war on its own people, and they're promoting their agenda.
In the wake of the deadly spring shooting that left 6 people dead, many are pointing to a possible loophole in our country's gun laws.
They're so desperate to take your guns, it's obvious. The only thing you have to ask yourself here is why. Why do they want your guns so badly? This isn't about promoting public safety, my friends. This is about disarming the population. This 15-year-old crisis actor was so giddy to participate that she tipped her hand and has told us what this is really about. Newsflash, this event is about promoting evil. It's obvious. This attempt to confiscate our guns through public opinion is also an attempt to seize our rights and to make us as vulnerable and as docile as possible.
The mainstream media continues its pathetic attempts to control the narrative. They recently put out a story saying that the Russians had hacked the Vermont power supply. They were going to shut down the power in the middle of the winter. The governor of Vermont came on television saying this was an act of war. Panic spread from coast to coast. The Russians have attacked once again. Lo and behold, just a few days later, the story was completely debunked, and the entire world mocked the mainstream media once again. Let us not forget what these brand names represent. They are fronts. The Washington Post, the New York Times, they're a front for the dark side. They represent Luciferians, child molesters, those that would engage this country in endless wars. They promote GMOs, chemtrails, fluoride in the water, mandated vaccines, open borders. They burn our flag and they want your soul. These people are the enemy from within. And every day that goes by that they are not labeled as such is a detriment to us all. We might as well hand over our country to the Luciferians. We might as well hand over our children to the child molesters. We might as well shelter in place and grab our ankles. Because to them we're nothing but cows in the pasture. Moo, cow. And they will not stop until they've labeled us all terrorists, until they've labeled our free speech as subversive propaganda. They can't handle the truth. They can't talk to you about the issues. And so they resort to name calling. To them, you are radicals. To them, you are terrorists. Because you love your country and because you love your faith. But let us not kid ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. These democrats, these libtards, these people that hate our country, their minds have been taken over by a virus. Their ideology is an outbreak. These genocidal maniacs mean to doom us all. They have no pity. They feel no remorse. They are the definition of sociopath. And there's only one cure to this virus, and that's mass deportation, a mass exodus of the heathen kind. It's either going to be us or them. Right now, they control the jobs, the food, the education, the government. They control it all. And they're lining us up for the slaughterhouse. It's either us or them. Either we get rid of them, or they're gonna get rid of us. They're already calling us terrorists. They've already labeled every patriot and every Christian a threat. We've already lost a generation to the body-snatching virus that controls their kind. It's either us or them. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
The story will be fully told only when circumstances permit the loyal American citizens once again to enjoy the freedom we in this country cherish, and when the disloyal, we hope, have left this country for good. We are setting a standard for the rest of the world in the treatment of people who may have loyalties to an enemy nation. We are protecting ourselves without violating the principles of Christian decency. And we won't change this fundamental decency no matter what our enemies do.
We really need camps for adults. We sure don't want to spend time with anybody who we disagree with politically.
Breaking news, the Washington Post now confirms that it was the Department of Homeland Security that hacked 20 different Republican states in the run-up to the presidential elections, and not the Russians. We repeat, the Washington Post now confirms it was the Department of Homeland Security and not the Russians that hacked the presidential elections.
Good evening, I'm Justin Farmer.
I'm Jovita Moore. We broke news on Twitter today that Kentucky and West Virginia trace possible cyber attacks to the same U.S. Department of Homeland Security IP address found in a similar attempt in Georgia. Channel 2's investigative reporter Aaron Diamond talked exclusively with Georgia's Secretary of State, who is very concerned. Aaron joins us now live from Midtown Atlanta. Aaron.
Jovita, secretaries of state offices run state election systems, and as the scope of this story grows, so does the number of questions, a lot of red flags that remain unresolved.
Another demand for answers from Georgia's Secretary of State Brian Kemp to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. On Thursday, we confirmed election agencies in West Virginia and Kentucky have also traced suspected cyber attacks on its networks in November to the same DHS IP address. Through an open records request, we got a hold of the results of a survey Kemp asked the National Association of Secretaries of State send to its members. West Virginia wrote back, this IP address did access our election night results on November 7, 2016. Kentucky responded, the same IP address did touch the Kentucky online voter registration system on one occasion, November 1st, 2016. So far, the feds have asked for a list of all state IP addresses that came under attack, but while eager to cooperate, Kemp won't just flip the feds the keys.
If they're asking for access to personal information in our voter registration systems and other things, there would have to be a very good explanation for us to grant access to that.
Breaking news, Politico and other publications in the far left have retracted their story on Russians hacking the U.S. elections after it has come out that Obama ordered the Department of Homeland Security to carry out the theft of American democracy. The Gateway Pundit reports, quote, the Georgia Secretary of State's office now confirms 10 separate cyber attacks on its networks, and they were all traced back to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, end quote. Polly Zett reports, quote, officials tell members of Congress the attack on state firewall could have been an inside job. An inside job, ladies and gentlemen, and not the Russians. Obama went full treason on this one, and now everybody knows it. The Free Thought Project reports, quote, with the official narrative coming from the Obama administration, indeed the president himself, that the Russians stand guilty of hacking the presidential election of 2016. Many are left scratching their heads in disbelief that the only government found to be hacking a state election system thus far is the Department of Homeland Security, end quote. The pinned post on Brian Kemp's official Twitter page, the Georgia Secretary of State says, at Donald Trump, media should spend less time on Russia and more time covering the Department of Homeland Security's failed cyber attacks in Georgia. Please investigate as President of the United States, end quote. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the new Watergate of our times. Please share this message far and wide. And if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.